I had spent 3 years building something extraordinary. 3 years of late nights, skipped lunches, and weekends lost as spreadsheets and phone calls with powerful men in expensive suits. The $2.8 billion deal was supposed to be my crown jewel. 15 Fortune 500 CEOs around a mahogany table, all waiting to hear my pitch, or ready to transform their companies with this massive investment. My hands trembled a little as I clicked to the first slide, but not from fear. I was ready. I was always ready. Then the door burst open. Vivian Blackwell, my boss for the last 3 years, stormed into the boardroom like she owned the room, like she always owned every room. Her heels clicked against marble, sharp and cutting, and her face wore that smile, that cruel, knowing smile that I had come to recognize as a warning sign. I felt my stomach drop before Vivian even opened her mouth. Something was wrong. Everything about this moment was wrong. "You're done here," Vivian announced, her voice smooth and confident as she slammed a folder onto the polished table. "Security will escort you out." The room went silent, not the calm kind of silent. The kind of silent that means the world just shifted on its axis. I stared at Vivian, waiting for the punchline, waiting to wake up from this nightmare. But Vivian's eyes were cold and certain. This was real. This was happening, right now. In front of 15 of the most powerful business leaders in the country. Papers scattered across the table. Someone's phone buzzed. A CEO shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Nobody looked at me. That was the worst part. They couldn't even meet my eyes. And in that terrible silence, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not sadness, not even anger, something else. Something that felt like clarity mixed with rage, like my entire body had just turned to ice water. What? I heard myself say, but my voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. Vivian didn't answer. She just gestured to 2 security guards who had mysteriously appeared in the doorway. They looked embarrassed, but determined. My legs moved on autopilot. My hands gathering my leather portfolio, my phone, my dignity, though dignity was the one thing I couldn't actually grab and hold on to. As I walked toward the door, one of the CEOs, a man with silver hair and a Rolex watch that probably cost more than most people's cars, muttered under his breath, "Was she serious?" I didn't stay to hear Vivian's response. I couldn't. If I stayed one more second, I would scream or cry or do something that would make this humiliation even worse, so I left. I walked down that hallway with my head high, even though my heart was smashing against my ribs like a bird trapped in a cage, and I heard the conference room door click shut behind me like the closing of a coffin. Sitting in my car in the parking garage, the shaking started, not weakness, preparation. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and I forced myself to breathe, to think, to remember. Every moment of the meeting before Vivian's entrance played back in my mind like a film I couldn't stop watching. The way Vivian had been busy that morning and couldn't brief me on last-minute changes. The way 2 of the CEOs had exchanged looks when I mentioned projected profit margins. The way the numbers I'd been given, the numbers Vivian had personally handed me yesterday, didn't quite match what was written on the contracts sitting on that table. That's when it hit me, like a punch to the gut, like lightning, like every piece of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a bad business decision. This was calculated. This was deliberate. Vivian hadn't fired me because I failed. Vivian had set me up to fail. The numbers were wrong because Vivian had made them wrong. The contracts were different because Vivian had changed them. I wasn't the failure here. I was the sacrifice. I sat in that car for a long time, watching the afternoon sun move across the windshield, and I made a decision. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't rage on social media or call a lawyer, not yet, anyway. I would do something much more dangerous. I would remember. I would investigate. I would wait. And when the time was right, I would burn Vivian Blackwell's entire world down, but I would do it so carefully, so methodically, that Vivian would destroy herself in the process. The next morning, my living room had transformed. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, surrounded by printed emails, spreadsheets I'd downloaded from the company's shared drive before my access was revoked, and notebooks filled with timelines and observations. I'd been awake since 3 a.m., and my eyes felt gritty from exhaustion, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Every discrepancy I'd missed in the blur of daily work suddenly became obvious. Email timestamps that didn't match, contracts with dates that had been altered. A money transfer to an account I didn't recognize, approved with a signature that looked almost, but not quite like the CFO's. Vivian had been sloppy. She'd been so confident in her power, so certain that nobody would ever question her, that she'd left a trail a blind person could follow. But I didn't move yet. I photographed everything, creating digital backups in encrypted files stored on a personal cloud account. I made copies of copies. I organized everything chronologically, creating a timeline that showed a clear pattern of manipulation spanning back almost a year. Every time I had successfully negotiated a deal, there was Vivian, taking credit in board meetings. Every time one of my projects had gotten bumpy, there was Vivian, ready with an explanation that made me look incompetent, while making her look like a savior. For 3 weeks, I didn't contact anyone from work. I lived on savings and anger, 2 things that burned inside me like fuel. I made a list of people I could trust, a short list, painfully short. Then I started making phone calls. I didn't ask about Vivian directly, that would be stupid. Instead, I called people casually, like I was just checking in, seeing how they were doing after the chaos of my firing. Marcus Webb, a fellow manager, hesitated when I mentioned that I was looking forward to finding new opportunities elsewhere. "Before you go," he said carefully, "there's something you should know. Vivian told us you were stealing client information. That's why you were fired so suddenly. But between you and me ... double quotes," he paused. And I heard the fear in his voice, the fear of someone who'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see and wanted it to go away. I never believed it. Vivian's been acting strange for months. Taking credit for things other people did. Changing numbers in reports. I just ... I didn't know who to tell. My heart raced. But I kept my voice calm. "Thanks for telling me, Marcus. That actually helps more than you know." The conversation with Aaron Torres, a senior director, was even more revealing. Aaron actually laughed when I asked how things were going in the office. "Honestly, everything's a mess without you. The CEOs are furious about the deal falling apart. They're saying Vivian promised them numbers she couldn't deliver. She's scrambling, making promises left and right, trying to save face with people who are starting to realize she's not as competent as she pretended to be." But the real breakthrough came 3 weeks after my firing, on a Tuesday morning, when I received a cryptic message from an unknown number. "I have something you need to hear. Office parking garage, 6 p.m, come alone." Every instinct told me it could be a trap, but desperation mixed with curiosity won out. The woman who met me by the concrete pillars was Kaisha Matthews, an HR coordinator I barely knew. She looked nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I'm going to lose my job for this," she said, "but I can't stay quiet anymore." Vivian paid someone in IT to alter a video file. She recorded a meeting where she was talking to board member Thomas Wong about how to discredit you. She planned your firing. She wanted to make you look bad in front of those CEOs so that she could take over your accounts and get the credit for closing the deal herself. Kaisha handed me a flash drive. "The recording is on here. It's everything you need." That night, alone in my apartment with headphones pressed against my ears, I listened to the recording. Vivian's voice was clear, casual, cruel. "She won't see it coming," Vivian said to Thomas, laughing like they were old friends sharing a joke. "I'll humiliate her in front of all the CEOs, make her look incompetent, and by the time she figures out what happened, I'll have already negotiated the deal myself. Those contracts are easy to fix once she's out of the picture. Nobody questions me." Thomas's response made my blood turn to ice. "And the financial discrepancies? Buried," Vivian said simply. "I've hidden them in subsidiary accounts. Even if anyone looks, it'll take them months to trace it back. By then, the deal will be closed. I'll have my promotion and my bonus, and I'll disappear from this company with a glowing reference and a 7-figure payout." The recording was clear. The intent was clear, the fraud was clear. And I finally had proof. But I still didn't move, not yet. I spent the next month observing Vivian from a distance, attending company events as a guest of still loyal colleagues, watching my boss move through the office like a shark who didn't know the hunters were circling. Vivian was getting sloppy with confidence. She was making bigger promises to the CEOs, overextending herself, telling each one a different story about the deal timeline. I watched and took notes and waited for the perfect moment. It came 3 months after my firing, when Vivian scheduled a major board presentation to unveil a new deal structure. This was going to be her comeback moment, her chance to prove her value to the company and secure that promotion she'd been dreaming about. I heard about it through Marcus, who casually mentioned it at a coffee shop we'd arranged to meet at. "She's bringing everything," Marcus said. "Financial projections, CEO contracts, everything. If this presentation goes well, she's basically untouchable." That's when I made my move. I didn't go to the board directly. I was smarter than that. Instead, I scheduled a private meeting with Thomas Huang, the board member whose conversation with Vivian was on that flash drive. I sat across from him in a small conference room at a hotel near his office, and I was calm. I was professional. I was completely composed as I handed him the flash drive. "I'm not here for revenge," I said, and I meant it. "I'm here because what she did affects not just me, but every deal she touches. Those financial discrepancies on the recording, they're real, the altered contracts. Real, and the board deserves to know before she presents that deal to you." Thomas listened to the recording with his face growing darker and darker. When it finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked at me and said, "Why didn't you come forward immediately after your firing?" "Because," I said, "I wanted to gather more evidence. I wanted to make sure this wasn't just he said, she said. I wanted to understand the full scope of what she was doing. And I wanted to give her enough rope to hang herself, which, based on what I've learned, she's been doing very effectively." The board presentation happened on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there. I'd learned that lesson. But Aaron Torres texted me throughout the morning with updates. His message is getting increasingly frantic. Vivian just got asked about the financial discrepancies in the subsidiary accounts. One of the CEOs just said the numbers she's showing them don't match what they received 3 months ago. Oh my God, she's panicking. Her hands are shaking. By noon, security was escorting Vivian from the building. By 2 p.m., the board had launched a formal investigation. By 5 p.m., my phone rang with a call from the company's CEO, asking if I'd be willing to come back to help stabilize the deals and identify any other manipulation Vivian had committed. I took the job, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to watch the process of accountability unfold. I wanted to see Vivian face the consequences of every lie, every manipulation, every calculated betrayal. And I wanted to be there when the lawsuit started, when the fraud investigation expanded, when federal prosecutors got involved because Vivian's embezzlement scheme reached into the millions of dollars. 6 months later, I sat in my restored office, the same office Vivian had tried to steal from me, and looked out at the city sprawling below. My title had changed. My salary had increased by 40%. The 15 CEOs from that original presentation had called me personally to apologize and to thank me for my integrity. One had even hired me as a consultant for his company at a rate that made my annual salary look small. But the real victory came when I received the news that Vivian had been indicted on fraud charges. The trial would take years, but the outcome was already clear. Every lie Vivian had told, every bridge she'd burned, every person she'd underestimated, it all came back to crush her. She destroyed herself with her own arrogance, with her own carelessness, with her own belief that she was too smart and too powerful to ever be caught. I felt no satisfaction in Vivian's downfall. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel triumphant, maybe even gleeful. But what I felt instead was something cleaner, something purer, the quiet certainty that justice had been served, not through rage or revenge, but through patience, evidence, and truth. Vivian had built a house of lies, and I had simply shown everyone the blueprints. The manager's fall was complete. Her career was finished, her reputation was destroyed. And I'd done it all without raising my voice, without making accusations before I had proof, without ever deviating from the high road. I'd simply waited for Vivian to reveal herself, then I'd let the truth do the work. In the end, that was the most powerful revenge of all. Not screaming into the void, not exposing her on social media, not even taking her to court first, just gathering the facts, waiting for the right moment, and letting the truth be undeniable. Vivian Blackwell had defeated herself, and I had simply been smart enough to document it. The city lights twinkled below my office as I turned back to my work. There were deals to close, CEOs to call, and a future to build. Vivian's trial would play out in the background like a forgotten news story, but I had already moved on. I'd taken back my power, my credibility, and my career, and I'd done it perfectly, cleanly, and completely. The storm had passed. And what remained in its wake wasn't just victory, it was vindication.